That is the opinion of the former Vice President of the United States, Dick Cheney. And tonight, in an exclusive interview, Mr. Cheney, he pulls no punches and openly talks about his concerns for this country and the direction that this administration is taking us all. We often hear from former Presidents Carter, former President Clinton. We often hear from Vice President Gore. But it seemed that every time since you've left office that you speak out, people are critical that you still have opinions. Does that surprise you?
No, I don't. After all this time, I'm not surprised by much of anything in this business. Yeah. No, I've done a couple of interviews. This is the third one, I guess. I'm often asked my views on administration policy, and I'm happy to give them. I think it's important not to personally attack the new president. I've never done that. But I do think they are addressing big issues, and those positions they take should not go unanswered. I think it's important that we respond to them. We've seen a lot of decisions made, especially in this administration, with respect to the war on terror, which is no longer a war on terror. It's an overseas contingency operation. This whole question of detainees is extraordinarily important. The terrorist surveillance program is important. We were challenged in very fundamental ways after 9/11. The nation was threatened. We lost 3,000 people that day. The biggest task we had as an administration was to make certain that that never happened again, to do everything we could to prevent those kinds of attacks. We put in place certain policies to do that. The Obama administration campaigned against those policies, and they're now in the process of dismantling some of them. We have a different point of view, that we have the opportunity to express it, and the American people have the opportunity to evaluate the right thing with respect to some of these important challenges.
Well, we're going to maybe get into some great specificity, but it was an interview that you gave. You know, Joe Biden came out almost the point to criticize you, and at one point to you as the most in history. Did that concern you in any way, or do you have any response for?
No, it doesn't concern me any. I mean, Joe Biden's been saying a lot. He's been a senator for, 30-some years. He's never been one who couldn't come up with a comment.
He's known for that?
Joe's got the job now. I wish him well. I hope he's able to prosper in it and make a contribution. So I've been criticized by experts, Sean. I don't worry a lot about it.
About criticism. Well, I did notice that the administration, the outgoing administration, President Bush made great outreach to the incoming administration. And one thing I couldn't find or wasn't able to read anywhere, did Joe Biden ever in any way reach out to you and ask any questions about the job of being VP in spite of maybe the public posturing?
We had one session where he and his wife came to the house, and basically we talked about the house. We showed him the vice president's residence and so forth. And I gave him at that point some administrative information, basically, about how many slots I'd had, how big the budget was, how much of it came from the Congress through the Senate, how much of it came from the executive branch and so forth. But that was it. We never talked policy. He suggested he might want to call me before January 20th. I said I'd be happy to talk to him, but I think they got busy on their side, and so we've never talked much about policy.
In 90 days, a lot can happen when you have change. We have a president that is now critical of our economic system. He's apologizing seemingly for our superpower status in the country, around the world, apologizing for America in general. He's now been described as going on an apologizing tour, and it doesn't seem to like to tell the story, the good story of America. At least he hasn't on this trip or on the most recent trip. Do you think that, does that show you anything about his ideology, about his thinking, or does that concern you in terms of what his belief system is or the principles that guide him in making decisions?
Well, I guess I've been concerned at the way that we've been presented overseas. There's a great temptation for new administration to come in, and when you find a problem, obviously to blame it on your predecessor. We did it. I'm sure the Obama administration's not the first one ever to do that. But what I find disturbing is the extent to which he's gone to Europe, for example, and seemed to apologize profusely in Europe, and been to Mexico and apologized there and so forth. And I think you have to be very careful. The world outside there, both our friends and our foes, will be quick to take advantage of a situation if they think they're dealing with a weak president or one who's not going to stand up and aggressively defend America's interest. The United States provides most of the leadership in the world. We have for a long time. And I don't think we've got much to apologize for. You can have a debate about that. But the bottom line is that, when you go to Europe and deal with our European friends and allies, some things they do very well, some things they don't. Sometimes it's important that a president speak directly and forthrightly to our European friends. And you don't get there if you're so busy apologizing for past U.S. behavior.
His line was, America's shown arrogance and has been dismissive of Europe. Is that the type of comment that you think is detrimental? And should he have maybe spent a little bit more time talking about the great sacrifice that America has made while Europe was adopting totalitarianism and embracing appeasement? America was acting decisively to beat back totalitarianism.
Sure. I think it's fair to say historically that much of Europe is free today because of the United States and because of our military forces, what we were able to do in World War II. Now we're faced with more challenges. They come about in Afghanistan, where obviously NATO's got troops deployed. That's a first. That's a significant development. We ought to be grateful for that. On the other hand, a lot of the forces that are deployed with NATO in Afghanistan aren't allowed for domestic political reasons of their governments to actually engage in combat. Very few of our NATO allies have robust military budgets. What they spend on defense is minuscule compared to what we spend. So I think there are always areas here for us to have good, thorough discussions, and we tell them what we don't like, they tell us what they don't like. We can find some middle ground out there, and I think it's important the United States not come across as arrogant, but it's also important as we not come across as weak or indecisive or apologetic. We did, during the Bush administration, take some very tough, bold action in terms of trying to deal with and defend the nation as well as our allies against that terrorist threat.
And coming up, more with my interview with Vice President Dick Cheney, including what he thinks about President Obama's glad-handing with Hugo Chavez, and a scandal is brewing in California as Democratic